All right, well, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Costanzo. I'm excited to be your host today. I am Vice President with Springer Publishing, and we're thrilled to bring you our webinar titled Top Tips for Managing and Refinancing Your Nursing Student Loans. And we're not surprised by the popularity of this webinar topic. We've got a significant number of webinar participants with us. And thank you so much for all of you for joining us. We expect our webinar to last about 45 minutes. Then we'll set aside some time for questions. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available about 5 to 7 days following the webinar. So let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Carl Buck and Mr. Kellen Williams. Our webinar will essentially be divided into two parts. Carl Buck will start by discussing strategies and top tips for reducing your cost of education before you start and while you're in college. And Carl will provide some current updates regarding the COVID-related American Rescue Plan. And then he'll provide some top tips and valuable information regarding the FAFSA and some great secrets regarding college aid awards and appeals. And then Kellen Williams will follow Carl with some excellent information and tips regarding repaying your loans, including federal loan repayment options and private repayment options. It's my pleasure to provide an introduction for Mr. Kellen Williams. Kellen is a senior manager with Laurel Road, and Kellen specializes in providing solutions which help to reduce the growing burden of student loans by educating individuals about the optimal repayment options that meet each individual's needs. Laurel Road offers a suite of student loan products, and I'm sure you'll find some very compelling information regarding ways to reduce the cost of your student loans. So stay tuned for some great information from Kellen. And hello, Kellen. Terrific to have you with us today.
Hello, you as well. Thanks, everybody.
And I'm also excited to introduce Mr. Carl Buck. Carl is a financial aid expert with more than 40 years of experience guiding students, parents, and educators on matters related to paying for college. And as a former director of financial aid at institutions such as Rice and Rutgers, Carl really brings a unique inside perspective to individuals and families to help them tackle the rising costs for both undergraduate and graduate students. Carl's a co-author of a new book called Paying for Your Graduate Nursing Degree Without Going Broke. And Carl, it's great to have you with us today as well.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it.
And with that intro, Carl, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick off this webinar for us.
Very good. Thank you, Frank, and welcome, Kellen. Did you notice that Frank emphasized that I had 40 years? That aged me so quickly. So you know who the young person is in this presentation. Just call me Uncle Buck and we'll go from there.
I like it.
All right, so on our first slide, you're all probably aware of the amount of capital infusion that has come from the federal government to accredited colleges all throughout the United States. And you can see on the slide the amount of money that has gone out to colleges. But really what I want to focus on in this particular slide is the majority of these funds are, quite honestly, meant for students. The colleges will use it to pay for part of their infrastructural needs, but these dollars are for you. And initially, colleges were told that only students who showed a demonstrated need, who had filed a free application for federal student aid would be eligible. Well, that's not the case any longer. If you can demonstrate to a college that you have financial need, and again, we're talking about demonstrating, have the ability to prove that you have a need, you march right over to the college financial aid office and let them know that you have a demonstrated need. And in addition, this isn't just for undergraduate students, it's for graduate students as well. And that hasn't been emphasized enough, at least in my opinion. Also, more recently, I've read that international students can qualify. So be aware of that. And colleges are to be proactive. They are to, in effect, notify their students that these funds remain. And I would suspect as we're moving into the fall term, those funds will be diminishing unless there's a new infusion. So, as I say many times to an audience, run, don't walk to the financial aid office to find out if those funds are still available and do you qualify. Now we'll move to the next slide. Well, the infamous free application for federal student aid. I think what's important to note here is the major change that occurred probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And that is historically, when you were filing your FAFSA, you would file it January 1st prior to moving on to college. And now what's happening is people are filing their FAFSA October 1. That's the starting date. And parents are now reporting their income from 2 prior years, not the last year. And to me, that didn't really simplify things. This is my own personal opinion, because so many things happen to families, regardless if this were a pandemic or not. But because you've had COVID-19 issues to contend with, many, many families have had their income tragically reduced or maybe even eliminated. So what we're really talking about on this slide is to make sure that you want to notify the College Financial Aid Office that what used to be a quote unquote normal situation for your family as far as income is concerned, that may not be the case anymore. And this is even regardless of the pandemic. And if you're an undergrad student, parental information is required for the financial aid analysis. Now, on the graduate student side, as you see in this bullet, graduate students for need-based student aid purposes, they're considered independent once you receive that undergraduate degree. However, in doing research, I have found out that some graduate schools are requiring parental information if that student is under the age of 30. Now that surprised me. So I guess the real message here is to make sure that you understand the detail of when you're applying to grad school. And also back to the undergraduate world, make sure that you have all of the application information that you need. It may not just be the free application for federal student aid. About 300 colleges around the country require the College Board's College Scholarship Service profile. That's a supplemental form. So the point here is, as you say in our last bullet, ask if your school requires any additional supplemental information, and they just might. Moving forward, the College Financial Aid Award Letter. What is it supposed to do? What kind of details should it have? How inclusive should it be? We'll talk about that. So in effect, what you see at the bottom part of the screen, you submit your free application for federal student aid. You list your colleges. You can list up to a maximum of 10. And then that's submitted to a central processor. And then it's sent on to the colleges that you've listed on the FAFSA. Then the student aid report comes back. And who does it come back to? It comes back to the student, not the parents, because the student is the filer. He or she is the applicant. And then comes the award letter, which we'll get into. But we wanted to give you that sequence of events. FAFSA, student aid report, and a lot of times students don't notify their parents. Hey folks, I've got my student aid report, which will list our family's expected contribution. We'll talk about that in the next few slides. Understanding the numbers. How much will you have to pay? Should you pay? And this is where really the devil's in the detail. Many colleges will list, the good news is, the inclusive cost, the full cost of tuition, fees, room and board, books and supplies. However, there still are some, and I've seen the award letters myself working with my own clients, where an award letter may list only tuition and fees, and maybe in supplemental information in fine print will be the room and board, books and supplies. So if you want to know the full cost of attendance, I would go to the school's website, not go to the admissions page because that's the marketing page, but go to the student aid landing page and see what that full inclusive costs are: tuition, fees, room and board, books and supplies. And in the health professional world, I was amazed at how high fees can be, especially for nurses going on, doctors going forward. And then on the financial aid side, grants and scholarships hopefully will be in that award letter. Federal work study, which is a part-time job. And by the way, if you were offered federal work study and it's need-based, see if you can work off campus. You'd be working probably in a nonprofit position, but wouldn't it be nice if you could align yourself in your major? Let's say you're majoring in journalism, and you went to work for the Red Cross, and you were able to do some writing for them. So you get paid, at the same time you support your degree as you move forward. And then you have federal direct loans, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but please be aware that direct loans, their interest rates will be going up. We'll talk about that a little later on. And then the infamous expected family contribution, or known as the EFC. And this is where it's the, oh my goodness, look by parents saying, are we supposed to sell our home to come up with liquid cash to make this happen for our child to go to college? But bear in mind now that the EFC, in my opinion, it's a generic measure. It isn't the real measure of your family's financial strength. Only you know what your family's financial strength is. And that's when you have to really understand how it was arrived. And you want to talk to the college about reviewing the expected family contribution. Is this money that's supposed to come out of my pocket? How does it all work? You could do a whole presentation just on FAFSA filing and understanding the EFC, but that's not going to happen today. And then what amount of money do you still have to pay in effect out of pocket? The majority of colleges around the country, they do not award full need. They will award, hopefully, some grants based on need, scholarships based on merit or athletic capabilities. And then there's normally some unmet needs still there. And to be quite honest, with the pandemic, there are a lot of schools that are struggling because many students did not return to come back and pay that tuition or pay the room and board. As a matter of fact, recent statistics will show approximately 3.5 to 5% of undergraduate students did not return to class this past spring. All right, we'll move forward. Comparing the award letters. And you really have the right to do this. There really isn't one template that colleges are using. I know that the Department of Education is trying to get schools to do that. But colleges have their own DNA. They want to have their own way of writing an award letter, so it can vary from institution to institution. So you need to determine, again, the out-of-pocket costs, how much may you have to borrow, have to work, and what are the conditions and timing related to both the admissions and terms and deadlines. So we're recommending that you use a spreadsheet or some kind of an online tool to do a legitimate side-by-side comparison of the kind of funding that you're being offered. And regrettably, some institutions will call an award letter loans. Well, to me, congratulating a family that they're totally in debt, to me, is not an award. That's a consumer information notice that you're going to have to borrow. Now, again, tuition fees, room and board, minus grants and scholarships, out-of-pocket costs. What kind of a real deal are you getting? And you have the right to be able to ask those kinds of questions. That's where you take ownership of the process. Next slide, please. Timing is everything. So here we are having this discussion in June. And a lot of folks will be returning again in the fall. And some are going brand new and others going on to grad school. But there's nothing wrong with appealing. And you can actually start the appeal in the summertime if you're going to go to school in the fall. And we're going to talk about how and when, how that works. Next slide. Here are some of the reasons to consider. And this isn't just an inclusive list. You can appeal anything and everything as long as you have documentation. So as we referenced earlier in the presentation, prior year, well, that may not be real any longer. And when circumstances have changed, and they have, I can assure you, it's time to appeal. You see our bullet here, further consideration. Truly, it's anything. And many times there may be other members of an extended family that move in with the FAFSA filing family, and that can be appealed because your discretionary income is going to help your extended family. But there's what's called truth and proof. You have to be able to prove what you're saying is your need. So you want to have strong corroborating information so that the institution knows that you're legit and you can move forward in a very positive, proactive way. And there really is a peer institution appeal. When I used to work at Rutgers, I know for a fact that our peer institutions were Syracuse University, Penn State. When I was at Rice, it was MIT, Emory, and many times families would appeal based upon an award letter given to a peer institution. And quite often I would pick up the phone and call the admissions office and talk to the director of admissions and say, what do you want to do here? Here's a family appealing based upon a better offer from a peer institution. This is okay. It's okay to move that forward. Next slide, please. Well, I know this sounds pretty simplistic, but I really mean it when we talk about appeal immediately, because with the pandemic, every family is appealing more than ever. Everything that I read research-wise is saying that it's doubled in the amount of families. So let's say you had an average of 25% of families appealing historically. Now it's up to 50 or 60% of FAFSA filers are appealing. Now here's a tip as well. I've always recommended to students that work with me, not only appeal for need-based funding, but if you're getting a scholastic award, you can always go back to the department in your major and see if there will be additional funds remaining for you. As I mentioned earlier, if you're having 3.5 to 5% of undergraduate students who didn't return in the spring, what if we project to this fall? You may have, again, a significant number of students not returning regrettably, and those spots may open up for a student who just missed out on a scholarship. And if you're moving into your junior year or even your sophomore year as an undergrad, see if in fact there are scholarships in your major that have opened up that you had not qualified for prior. Next slide, please. Well, this is what we're recommending on how to appeal. You want to go over the entire college's website, and I'll be very, very candid with this presentation. I was working with a client who's going to a well-known Ivy League institution in the Northeast. And I was working on the appeal, and I went to this particular college's website, printed out all of their material on how to appeal. And then when I called the institution to make sure that I had all of the necessary information and criteria, I was told that the family would have to reach a certain threshold of dollar value in order to appeal. And that dollar value is $6,000 of need. And that was not mentioned on the website. So to me, that wasn't full transparency. It's always helpful to get the name of the person and their position to appeal if you can, virtually or in person. Again, we talked about proper documentation. We talked about truth and proof. That's what you're going to need because everyone's appealing. And then make sure to follow the school's instructions. They will have a step-by-step way, and it should be listed on the website. And the Federal Department of Education is requiring that schools be proactive in letting families know, yes, you should appeal, particularly because of the pandemic situation. And again, keep a copy of all information. Schools may lose their information, but at least you have it in case that situation ever arises. Next slide, please. I'm asked this on a recurring basis by families. So, Carl, if we appeal, is that going to be frowned on, looked at in a negative way? So, will it reduce our getting any aid or potential early admissions? The answer is no, particularly now. Schools expect and anticipate families to appeal. It's no surprise to them. And what I've been reading lately is folks from the admissions office and the registrar's office are getting more involved in the appeal as well, because it's not easy to hire financial aid staff to deal with appeals. So I think there's a lot more training going on amongst the enrollment management crew, meaning registration and admissions and student aid, trying to be proactive, trying to help families just like you. So you appeal ASAP. Next slide. Well, we're moving on to Kellen, and I do want to mention, prior to Kellen speaking, just what I mentioned earlier in this presentation. July 1st, the student loan interest rates are going up for both a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan, as well as associated fees that go with interest rates increasing. And Kellen will have good news for you on that front. Kellen?
Thanks, Carl. Really appreciate all the information that you delivered to the attendees here. It's always educational, even for myself. So thanks so much. And just looking forward to piggybacking off of what Carl shared, everyone. You know, Carl was talking about ways to maximize, right, the amount of funding that you can receive when going to school. And the goal of what I would like to share with you on an educational basis is to show ways to maximize the amount of money that you can save when having to pay back these loans that you inevitably had to take out when completing your schooling. So this right here, as you can see, is just a quick update on what we're going to discuss. I'm going to talk about some federal loan repayment options and some private repayment options. But before that, I'll give a quick update on COVID-19. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So just want to let everybody know that although the rates are going to increase, like Carl just said, beginning July 1st, a lot of everybody who's probably on the line is not going to feel that because of the payment holiday that we're in right now. So as a result of COVID, last year through the CARES Act, the government decided to allow people to extend the amount of time that they had before they're responsible for begin paying back their loans. Originally, the payment holiday was going to end on January 1st, 2021, but they decided to extend it to September 31st, 2021. So in just a few short months, just know that you're going to have to start paying back these loans, right? So what does this benefit? So anyone with direct or FFEL program student loans held by the Department of Education, you're going to benefit on the fact that you're not going to have to pay back these loans. And when you do, know that you're going to have 6 free payments towards your 120 qualifying payments. And I'll get into what I mean by the significance of the 120 and things of that nature. But I do want to call your attention to the link at the bottom of this slide here. Just know that if you want additional information on any of this, you can go to studentaid.gov and they'll be glad to give you that information. If you could go to the next slide, please. Quickly, just want to give you an idea of what it looks like. So you taking out these federal loans like Carl talked about, and what are the options to pay them back? I'm going to focus a little bit on that. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So first thing that you can do if you choose, right, you probably have taken out more than one loan to complete your schooling. If you've done so, you can consolidate those loans. If you decide to consolidate those loans, just know that they're going to take a weighted average of all those loans, and the repayment terms are going to vary from anywhere from 10 years to 30 years. You could determine what that looks like, but as you can probably assume, the shorter the amount of payment terms that you have, in this case 10 years, the higher amount that you're going to have to pay per month, and then 30 years is going to be lower. But if it's 30 years, is inevitably going to be more interest tied into the amount that you're going to be paying back from these terms. But know that it's a weighted average if you choose to do so. And you can get more information on this at studentaid.gov/repay. If you could go to the next slide, please. So something that I do want to point out to people on the line here, particularly because it's likely that you may work for a governmental agency, you may work for a hospital or 501c3, right? People that are in that situation have the ability to lean into the public service loan forgiveness, right? PSLF for short. So essentially what that means is that if you are a professional that satisfies those requirements of working for a nonprofit, governmental agency, a 501c3, then you have the ability to have income-driven repayments, and I'll talk to you about what that looks like. But if you have income-driven repayments for 10 years, then they will actually forgive the rest of your student loans, right? So that's something that you want to know. If you fall into that boat after 10 years, you can take advantage of that. I think that's a great program that the federal government has provided everybody in this very particular case. Just making sure that you have on-time monthly payments for 120 straight months. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we talked about income-driven repayment, right? There are really three different types of that. So the basic thing that you need to know when it comes to income-driven repayment is that the government is going to say, listen, depending on how much money you're currently making, we're going to take 10% of your discretionary income that we're going to apply, and you're going to be responsible for paying back that loan. Now, there are three different types that you can do. You can have the revised pay as you earn, which is repay. I always like that acronym, repay. But you have the repay loan, you have the pay loan, and you have the IBR, income-based repayment. The difference really in all three is that essentially 10 to 15%, depending on which type you decide to lean into, is what you're going to be responsible for relative to your discretionary income. And the repayment period is going to be different. So you have anywhere from 20 years to 25 years that you have to pay back. But this is something that I want to let you guys know. If you actually pay back these loans through income repayment for 20 to 25 years, however, whatever dollar amount you have left on those loans at the end of that repayment terms, either 20 years or 25 years, they will actually waive the rest of your loans. You will have to pay taxes on the amount that they're going to waive, but if you actually last 20 to 25 years, then they'll repay that amount. So that's an option that I want you to know that you have if you decide to go through this income-driven repayment method. If you could go to the next slide, please. So now I want to talk a little bit about, well, you have the federal student loans that you have to repay through the income-driven repayment plans if you decide to go that route, or you have the private lender route that you may want to go. Laurel Road, the company that I work for, is an example of a private lender that you can pursue that will help you to pay back your loans. So the interest rate that you have on a federal loan is going to be standardized, and the repayment is going to be anywhere from 10 to 30 years. I know I just said up to 25 years, but it can be up to 30 years. And then you have a private lender such as Laurel Road, and the repayment terms that we have is going to be as short as 5 years and is going to be as high as 20 years. It really depends on what you will want to do. But the way that we determine what your interest rate is going to be is not going to be standardized, right? We're going to look at your credit worthiness, right? And there are a number of different factors that go into the credit worthiness that we have for each applicant. But I do want you to know that as a result of the relationship that Laurel Road has with Springer, you have the opportunity to lean into a benefit. And that benefit is whatever your interest rate is going to be, and we'll get into what that may be, right? You're going to have a rate reduction on that of 0.25%, right? That's going to be pretty significant, as well as other rate reductions that you could potentially get on top of that when you're talking about thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars that you have to pay back over the life of the loan. If you could go to the next slide, please. So just continuing on what the difference is between the two, just know that the forbearance is going to be a little bit longer when it comes to the federal loans. I know it was on the slide that I just specified, but I didn't identify it at the time. It's up to 36 months. Really, we're in this, really, it's going to be over a year now that people have this payment holiday. So hopefully, people have been able to save some dollars, be in a good situation relative to your professional status, and earn some money so that when it kicks back in at the end of September, you have the ability to repay back these loans. But also know that essentially the anything that you do relative to determining your credit worthiness is going to be reported on your credit score. It's not going to be negatively, it's not going to account negatively towards you, particularly because the way in which we do it at Laurel Road. If you were to go to the website and you were to check out through the link that we will provide to you at the conclusion of this webinar, by tapping into the benefit that we have for you through the partnership, you'll see that all the information that you put in to determine what your rate is going to only be through a soft credit pull. So it's not going to have any impact. And then we really are confident in the fact that over 95% of those who put in accurate information, the rate that they receive when we do the hard credit pull is going to be the same rate that you would have expected. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And this is where we're talking about some of the private repayment options. You can go with a Laurel Road, like we talked about, and there's some other ways as well. So if you could go to the next slide. What are the benefits when trying to determine should I go the private lending route? Well, if you go the private lending route, the interest rate that you will receive for a private loan is going to be well below that you would receive for a federal loan. So just to give you some context, there are multiple loans that you can have when you have the federal loans, the rates. We'll use the number of 7% as the average of what you will receive for a federal loan, but there's some loans in excess of 8%. I was, anecdotally, I'll just give you a quick story. 2 weeks ago, I was at a friend's birthday party for their 2-year-old son, and I was speaking to some of the people in attendance. One was a lawyer, the other one was a pharmacist, and I started talking about this job and what they do and what I do. And I was shocked to hear that they had loans that were 9% plus. And I went, wow, that's pretty crazy. But they did a good job of paying back those loans that had the highest interest rates before tackling others. They would actually be a good example of the consolidation that I talked about earlier. So they wouldn't have to necessarily have loans that would be so high, but it really depends. If you have, $100,000 for a loan that's really low versus $25,000 for a loan that's really high, then consolidating what it really makes sense. You should just focus on the higher loan and then possibly look to refinance that lower loan through a private lender such as Laurel Road. But ultimately, you have a lower interest rate. You have the ability to save more money over the life of the loan. You could pay down your loans more quickly. You have lower monthly payments, which I think is really cool because you have the ability now to utilize those dollars for investments, savings, going out, having fun, like we're all looking forward to doing as we're, coming out of COVID over these next 6 months. But ultimately, want to know that you can save money and always usually save more money through a private lender. The difference between a private lender of 7% and Laurel Road is we always like to say the 2% difference. So you will never have a loan that's anywhere in the fives, right? The highest rate that you will have with Laurel Road will be 5%. But we have many of our clients that are in the fours and actually well below four. We really like to hang our hat on the fact that we have the ability to provide the lowest interest rates in the marketplace. And part of that is because of our expertise. We've been around for 10 plus years. We were the first to originate loans in healthcare, but also through the partnership that we have with KeyBank that purchased us over 2 years ago. We both had matching expertise and interest in healthcare, but now we get to lean on their massive balance sheet, which allows us to have low rates and no fluctuation, which is particularly important during these COVID times. If you could go to the next slide, please. This just gets into quickly a little bit of the details that I touched upon earlier. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. I'll just say that usually when you decide to go with a private lender, there's an application fee. We don't have any application fees. Sometimes there are origination fees. We don't have any origination fees. And we, like I already said, have the lowest rates in the marketplace that allows you to save thousands of dollars. And through the partnership that we have with Springer Publishing, you have the ability to receive a 0.25% interest rate discount. So that's something I want you to point out. And actually, you can even add to that discount. Like me, I don't know, this is what I do. All of my bills that I need to pay, I don't like to think about it, out of sight, out of mind. I want everything auto pay and it just goes. So I don't have any missed payments. But the benefit of not having missed payments is that it really, really, really increases your credit score, because they show that you are a reliable person that they can lend dollars to. As a result, if you decide to go into an auto pay with us, that's an additional 0.25%. So right there, that's a half point. And if you're already comfortably in the fours and now you have a half point, now you could be flat at 4% or even lower. So that's the reason why we really hang our hat on offering the best rates in the marketplace and the ability to save people 20, 25, $30,000 over the life of the loan. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is just talking about the fact that we're in a historically low interest rate climate. Even so, like Carl pointed out, rates are going up. I don't know if you've paid attention to the news over the last week, but I did see something both in the morning news and on the evening news talking about how basically outside, as we're all waiting to get back outside, outside is more expensive now. I don't know if you guys knew that, but on average across all the things that you would spend money on, right, outside is over 2% more expensive. And in some areas, it's way more expensive, like renting cars or wanting to travel and take flights or hotels, right? Things are 25, 30% more expensive. So things are about to go up. So know that whether it's the income driven repayment through the federal payment plans that we talked about or the private lender, it's really important to take advantage of where we are right now relative to the interest rates. If you go to the next slide, please. And this is just to determine at the end of the day, well, how do I know what's right for me, right? Should I try to, refinance my loans through a private lender? Is this the right time? Should I wait? What should I do? At the end of the day, I always say it's all about everybody's different, right? Just like a fingerprint, everybody's situation is different. However, the number one thing you should determine is where am I right now? How comfortable and how stable am I financially? Once you are stable financially, that's when you should lean into and start considering the private lender route, right? Because the private lender route is going to determine your credit worthiness. So if you're stable financially, you have nice money in the bank, you show a record of paying things on time and paying things well, your rate's going to be super low. And then you can now save thousands of dollars on those loans. Something else that I want you to know as well is that if you decide to pay back these loans, every single year you can write up to $2,500 when it comes to filing your taxes. I advise you to look at and to explore with a tax professional, anything having to do with taxes. However, just know that that's something really good. And like I already talked about, keep your credit in good shape. That's always going to put you in the best situation when it comes to private lending. Can you go to the next slide, please? And that's it for us. So, at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that you are in the best position to get as much money as possible when it comes to financing your education, and then to maximize the savings that you can have when paying back your loans after you graduate and you're now a professional. So, Carl and I really appreciate your time. If there are any questions, Frank, I'll pass it over to you. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Kellen. Thank you very much, Carl. We do have a few questions. So Kellen, I'll start with a number of questions for you. So the first one is, can you refinance more than once?
You can refinance more than once. This is somewhat similar to the last thing that I was stating relative to making sure that you're financially stable and looking at the full breadth of all the loans that you have. You might decide to only refinance one loan and keep the other loans through an income, repayment plan, or you may decide to do them all at once. The choice is really up to you, but just be aware that when you do choose to refinance a loan through a private lender, there are normally origination fees as well as application fees involved. So take that into account. Unfortunately, with Laurel Road, we don't have either.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Kellen. And when's the best time to refinance?
There is no best time, really. The best time is probably it might seem like I'm keep hitting the nail on the head over and over again and beating the drum, but it's all about when you are financially stable. When you are financially stable and your credit is in a great place, that's when you should take advantage of the private lenders that are out there, because they're going to give you the opportunity to decrease the amount of money that you're paying monthly, and also decrease the amount of time that you're going to have to pay back that loan, which is always best for you as a person looking to pay back your loans.
Oh, great advice. And then just a reminder, when will that CARES Act interest and payment holiday end? Just tell us one more time.
Oh, right. So that ends on the end of September is when it ends. So October 1, it kicks in, and just you want to make sure that you're prepared. So you have about 2-3 months to make sure that you're in the best position and you can take advantage of it. But just to reiterate what Carl said, just know that next month the rates are going to go up. So that's another example of outside is more expensive.
Got it. Got it. Thank you, Kellen. And a few questions for you, Carl. Carl, in your remarks, you mentioned transparency. Can you provide a little more detail about what that means to our audience, and and maybe even give an example of, clear transparency versus not so clear transparency?
Sure. Well, when I was writing the book for you folks for Springer, and I went online to a variety of colleges of nursing all throughout the United States, and saw that disappointed me in many ways, that some of these grad schools of nursing were listing their cost per credit. So you really had to do a heck of a lot of math to figure out, okay, let me get this straight. If I'm going to take 12 credits or 6 or 9, what's that going to look like? And one side of the page, you just had a whole list of what it was per credit. And then on another page were fees that were quite expensive. And I would have preferred, as a consumer, seeing an inclusive lists right off the bat to make it far more simple as a consumer, as it relates to what are my costs going to be, rather than me having homework given to me by the institution. So I think more transparency is needed. And I think it'll come in time, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, that's helpful and great guidance, Carl. The next one talks a little bit about taking ownership. Can you describe what you mean by students and the fact that they should take ownership of the college financial aid process?
Sure. Well, case in point, just talking to a student Friday evening. He and his parents are heading down to a well-known public university in the South, and they're going to be going on a college campus tour while they're on vacation in this particular region. So I said, look, one of the things you can do is to call that school in advance. Obviously, you're going on the campus tour, but I want you to get a meeting with a college admissions officer while you're on that campus. In other words, break yourself out of the pack, have a one-on-one meeting so you can impress that admissions rep or even a decision maker. They will take notes about you, not about the group that you were part of. So that's how you can take initiative and take ownership of the college going process.
A terrific example. And one final question, Carl. Are there any upcoming changes to the FAFSA filing process?
Well, actually, I saw today that there's going to be a transition now versus an immediacy of things changing in 2023. Here's an example. Just about a week ago, I was reading that for 2023-24, when a family is filing their FAFSA, they will not have their expected family contribution cut in half if they have 2 kids in college at the same time. Well, the good news is that now is being delayed to the year 2024-25. But that's a substantive change. So the good news, it's delayed, but that's going to impact a lot of middle income and upper income families who historically, if you've had more than one child in college, you'd have your expected family contribution divided proportionally per student. So now in 2024-25, if you have 2 kids in college at the same time, that expected family contribution will not be cut in half.
Hmm.
So other changes will occur in 2023. And the best thing is to stay tuned to the news that will be distributed by the college that you have an interest in.
That's great advice. Thank you, Carl. Well, that wraps it up, everyone. Thank you, Kellen. Thank you, Carl, for sharing your expertise with our audience. It's been a pleasure. And for everyone who joined us, thank you very much. We're here to help. We have enjoyed providing this webinar to you. Carl has provided some fabulous tips regarding how to save while in school, and Kellen has provided some terrific updates and tips regarding how to save after school. So feel free to reach out to us. Thank you once again. We will see you in our next webinar. So have a great day. Goodbye for now, everybody.
Thank you.